On today's episode of the Cryptoverse. So you may already be aware of this, but you know the Dubai government, they're aiming to be the world's first entirely blockchain-based government by 2020. Now, whenever I deal with this topic, I always think, I hope they know what they're doing because it's a one-way trip. And by that I mean, once the citizenry get used to the idea of the transparency and the certainty that a blockchain-based government provides, you can't really then go back to having a government that's private and non-transparent. So if the government ends up not liking it, if they go, oh, unintended consequences, they're then stuck with the transparency and the certainty that the blockchain provides. Now, just to be clear, I'm totally in support of governments moving to blockchain-based systems. I'm just saying I hope they know what they're doing. So the latest step they've taken is this thing called DubaiPay, which is an online government portal for doing payments that use blockchain technology for real-time reconciliation and settlement of transactions. So the overall goal of this whole, Dubai smart government, smart city thing is to increase the efficiency of the government. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, a government is literally just, they call it an administration, don't they? So administration is a pain in the butt for businesses. It's generally just paperwork that doesn't really add any value. It's just record keeping and blah, 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 doesn't really add any value. So an administration, like a government that's just purely paperwork, doesn't really add any value to the economy and just consumes revenues and so on, right? So the ultimate end process of a government on the blockchain would be, well, little or no physical government whatsoever. You would almost end up with an entirely autonomous government on the blockchain. So it's all technology based. And that's what technology is good at, isn't it? It's taking these administrative processes that don't require human input and are kind of mechanical and automating them to the fastest possible way of doing it, almost instantaneous using technology, and almost to the point where it's costless. And that's the problem with the government is you take in tax revenues of say $100 million, and then you're supposed to spend that 100 million on public services, but you never get the full $100 million of tax revenues being spent on public services because some of it is lost in the friction of the actual administration process itself. So you might end up with, 70 million of it going to actual public services, and that other 30%, say, is just lost in the friction. So the cheaper you can get that, the better, because more of that tax revenue can end up being spent on actual public services, providing actual value to the citizenry. So that's the idea and the way I understand it. So I'm completely happy for them to move everything onto the blockchain. And that's why I said I hope they understand and are happy with the ultimate end goal of the government ended up being pretty much eliminated. And that's really the only thing that makes me question it is I don't generally see projects starting in a way that makes the organization that's doing the project making themselves irrelevant, right? That's the creative destruction thing. I think that's the way organizations should be. You should create a business, start a project with the explicit intention of putting yourself out of business, because then you have categorically and permanently solved the problem for which you aimed to solve, right? And pharmaceuticals is the easy cheap shot here, which is pharmaceutical companies have no particular interest in the cure because there's no money in the cure. The money is in the ongoing sale of a remedy. So for the pharmaceutical industry to actually systematically cure one illness after another would ultimately put them out of business, which is what they should be doing, but they don't do that because they're not in it for providing value. They're in it for the never-ending, stream of profit they can have by remedial actions. So maybe the Dubai government won't go that far. Maybe they'll stop short. Maybe they'll stop at the point where the government is small and they oversee the automated system, but stop short of going entirely automated, right? So what's the ultimate benefit of Dubai or any government doing this, right? In my view, they're making Dubai an increasingly seductive environment for entrepreneurs and highly skilled workers to move there, right? That's generally how it goes. I mean, governments have everything to do with how appealing it is for companies and highly skilled people to go to that jurisdiction and say set up a company or do their best work and so on, because it's the governments that set the laws, they set the tax rates, and they set the regulations. And that creates the environment with which highly skilled workers are going to find appealing or not, or very innovative businesses to find appealing or not. So the governments are also the organization you have to actually register your company with, file your financials with if you're an employee and all that sort of stuff. So the better deal that the government offers you in terms of tax rates in that country, and the easier it is, right, of course, because you don't want to have to fill out tons of paperwork, then the more companies and the more highly skilled workers will want to go there. So as ever, in the world of cryptocurrencies, it's all based on incentives. That's the thing. That's what the whole thing is based on. It's one of the biggest lessons I've personally learned by studying the crypto revolution. Basically, it goes like this. If you want a group of people to exhibit a certain type of behavior, the only sustainable way to do that is to create an incentive for people to move towards that results in them exhibiting that behavior, right? So trying to get people to do things by force, it's ultimately doomed to fail because you are working against their free will. So thinking you can somehow brainwash people into letting go of their self-interest, this just goes against nature. So just don't try, is my philosophy. So appealing to people's self-interest in such a way that they end up wanting to do what you want them to do is the best way, because they get what they want and you get what they want. It's win-win, right? And win-win is the only way to make anything sustainable. Because otherwise, the losing party is always going to have a bind. They're always going to be resisting it and wanting to go their own way. So in terms of which country to choose to set up a company in, or if you're a highly skilled worker, which country to go and work in, say the founders of a company, they want to make the most money possible with the least amount of effort. And trying to rub that out, it's never gonna work, because that's fundamentally what the entrepreneurs want to do. So if Dubai becomes the place that offers, say, the best tax rates, the best laws, the simplest laws, and the ease of setting up a company, and then the ease of which reporting your financials to the government and all that sort of stuff, if that's even a requirement, some countries don't even require you to file financials with the government. I mean, if there's no tax on income, why bother reporting your income? Why make that necessary? So some countries, I'm not sure if the Seychelles is still like this, but they don't even, back when I was studying it, they didn't even require you to report to the government what you were earning, because there was no point unless they were going to tax you, which they didn't. So not sure what the rules are in the Seychelles right now, but that's why they sort of became famous. So if that is an easy jurisdiction, it's easy to report, tax rates are low, it will no doubt increase the number of businesses that go and set up in that jurisdiction and the number of skilled workers that go there. And this becomes like how countries compete, right? Governments and countries do compete with each other for talent, whether that's entrepreneurial talent or highly skilled workers. And this is my whole philosophy on tax. The lazy government approach to increasing revenues is simply to put the price up, which is just increase the tax rates, which takes more money from the same people, right? Now that is ultimately doomed to fail because one by one, companies making the good money, right, the ones actually providing value, attracting the sales from the citizenry and so on, making good sales, making good money, they will ultimately reach their limit for what they think is reasonable tax rates, and one by one they'll leave the country, thereby causing the government to lose all the tax revenue from that innovative company. And this is ultimately the downward spiral, right? The company with the highest revenue, say they leave because they can't stand the tax rates anymore, that lowers government revenues, and then the governments try and make up for it by increasing the taxes on who's left. That's kind of compounding the problem though, because then say the second biggest company has just had their tax rate go up, their bottom line shrinks, they go, don't like this, they disappear, government revenues drop even further, causing the government to increase taxes even further on who's remaining, and down we go, right? So you end up with greater and greater taxes on poorer and poorer producers. So that's the wrong way to do it. So that's what happens when you get greedy as a government and you try and make money by force. That's why I say doing it by force is just never going to work. So by contrast, let's go the other way now. A government could generate way more tax revenue by taking a smaller percentage from a much larger amount. And this is where seducing people, highly productive workers and highly productive companies comes in. Say, for example, if a government had a 10% tax rate across the board. It wasn't one of these stupid tax systems like we have in the UK, where the more you earn, the more you pay. And it's not just like that. If it was 10% across the board, it would be the more you earn, the more you pay. If you earn £10, you'd pay £1 in tax. If you earn 100 million, you'd pay 10 million, right? So that would be the more you earn, the more you pay. But in the government, there's a sliding scale where it gets worse. So not only is it like the more you earn, the more you pay, but it compounds. So the more you earn, the actual amount of tax you pay increases by percentage. So you start off with a 20% tax rate and it goes all the way up to 45%, which is stupid, right? Because the incentive to produce more and more and more drops dramatically, exponentially, the higher up the earning you go. So say, for example, you had a government with a 10% tax rate across the board that didn't increase. There was just one tax rate, it was 10%, no matter how much you earn, right? It would be much better, in my view, to take 10% of, say, a $10 trillion economy than it would say to take a 50% tax on a $2 trillion economy. And that goes back to what I was saying. The reason you'd end up with a $2 trillion economy, having shrunk from, say, originally a $10 trillion economy, is because one by one, those companies and those high producers would leave, shrinking the economy, meaning the government would have to take a greater piece of what's left in order to maintain their revenues, which is just ultimately a downward spiral into nothing. And even if the government ended up with less money overall, well, the country would still be more prosperous because the government has less money, and it would mean they wouldn't be able to provide so many public services and would be forced to leave the provision of those services to the free market. So whichever way you slice it, lower taxes end up being better for everybody in that country. So this kind of Dubai story just gave me an excuse to say all this sort of stuff. One thing I would say about Dubai in particular, to be fair, is that Dubai are able to offer things like zero income tax because the government is largely funded by their oil revenues, which isn't something many countries in the world can rely on. And if you are interested in getting much deeper insight into things like, economic leverage points like I've been talking about today, I'd like to recommend an audiobook that I finished recently, which is The Bitcoin Standard, which is available on audible.com. So this book starts right at the beginning, when money was first used as a replacement for barter, and it goes step by step through monetary history to the modern day, and then describes how a Bitcoin standard would work, just like the gold standard, but Bitcoin being this asset class we've never had before, what the world would look like if we used Bitcoin as the world reserve. So click on the link below to listen to a sample of this audiobook, and then if you buy it through Audible through my link, then that'll help support the show. And if you hate ads and sponsors, you can now remove them by going to our Patreon page, signing up as a supporter, and then getting access to privately hosted versions of the Cryptoverse, which have no ads or no sponsors or anything like that. But that's all I've got for you today. So if you like this episode, go ahead, hit the like button. If you disliked it, you can hit the dislike button. Please leave me a comment below with some feedback and get subscribed. And if you would like access to my very best material, such as my structured online courses, check out my website, cryptoversity.com, and you'll find all the courses listed on the courses page. If you want to follow me on the social networks, check out the podcast page where all the social networks are listed there. Other than that, I'll be back with the next episode of the Cryptoverse. So until then, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.